Have you recently been in an accident and need some legal advice? Have you noticed that around the holidays, accidents tend to happen more often? If that happens to you or has happened to you recently, you might want to find a lawyer to help you tackle all of the guesswork when it comes to personal injury compensation. In fact, a recent study suggests that personal injury claims may earn up to $24,000 in compensation. What if I told you that this can be easy? If you head on over to accident.com/podcast and your state is in the growing coverage list, you'll see a network of personal injury lawyers throughout the U.S. who will say what cases they specialize in. You'll then fill out a quick, maybe 1 or 2 minute form, and if your claim is accepted, the closest attorney to you will reach out to you to schedule a free consultation. Filling out a form is easy, so head on over to accident.com/podcast and find out what your claim is worth.
A Nefarious Nightmare contains themes that may be explicit or triggering for some. Specific warnings and disclaimers will be mentioned in the show notes. A Nefarious Nightmare assumes all parties that are mentioned in these cases to be innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. Listener discretion is strongly advised. You can help us grow the show by leaving us a 5-star written review on Apple Podcast or Spotify, or you can join our Patreon for lighthearted bonus content. With this, welcome to Season 6.
Last week, we discussed the chilling case of Paris Lee Bennett, whose horrifying act of sororicide shocked Abilene, Texas. Diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, or APD, Paris's upbringing, marked by familial changes and untreated mental health issues, took a tragic turn on February 4th, 2007.
We delved into the alarming statistics on sexual assault in America, highlighting the pervasive issue affecting millions. Paris's escalating aggression, illustrated by a knife incident, hinted at a deeper psychological turmoil. Despite Charity Lee, his mother's efforts, a lack of intervention allowed the situation to escalate, culminating in Paris's brutal murder of his 4-year-old sister, Ella. The case underscores the urgent need for mental health awareness and preventative measures to avert such devastating outcomes. Today, we will discuss the conclusion and aftermath. With that, I'm Amanda Cronin.
And I'm Courtney Fenner, and A Nefarious Nightmare presents West Texas Psychopath, The Murder of Ella Bennett, Part 2.
As we said, the case underscores the urgent need for mental health awareness and preventative measures to avert such devastating outcomes. We talked about Charity, Paris, and Ella's upbringing last week, discussed a bit about sexual assault and abuse statistics, clued you into the personality of Paris, and now we want to see him burn. But instead, we want to get through this and remember sweet baby Ella Bennett, who did not deserve any of this. Where we left off last week was when the 911 call was made, only for everyone to discover that he hadn't actually performed CPR, but pretending for the 911 operator. We will continue part 2 from where we left off, finding Paris in the interviewing room.
During the interview, Paris maintained his story claiming to be hallucinating, and he further claimed that his baby sister was a quote-unquote pumpkin-headed demon on fire. He added that he had been sleeping next to her, and then he woke up terrified to the sight, once again claiming of his 4-year-old sister that she was engulfed in flames. He blamed his actions on all of this, saying also that in his hallucination, she was laughing at him. Guys, she was a 4-year-old.
Remembering that he lied about performing CPR, the police did not believe his story. Another thing they noticed is that he was fake crying. He would make the sounds, but absolutely no tears. Then, the autopsy report came back, serving even more proof that Paris had been lying, because in addition to her stab wounds, the autopsy noted marks indicating of a beating and strangulation. Investigators and forensic experts also found Paris's DNA by the way of seminal fluids in Ella's bed, compared to the fluid found in the shorts that Paris was wearing at the time of the murder.
Obviously, at this point, a search warrant was executed, and the discovery was made that Paris had been watching violent pornographic images including S&M, bondage, and sadism. And just hours before he murdered his sister, they found snuff films in his search history. Essentially, the entire 911 call, his mask of sanity, and the fake crying were all indicative of a 13-year-old psychopath.
There was no denying, not by Charity, not by law enforcement, nobody, that Paris had willingly murdered his sister. When she confronted him, he was quiet at first. Then his demeanor went completely dark, and coldly he said, quote, "Well, it took you fucking long enough," end quote. When Charity then confronted him about his DNA being found, he completely lost his shit in a blind rage, flipping a table, punching a wall, all before walking away.
Paris faced legal proceedings after confessing to the murder of his young sister during the 911 call, which for those of you just tuning in was played in part 1, so if you missed it, please go back and listen. He then was arrested on February 5th, 2007, and later went to trial in 2009 at the age of 17, where he would be charged with juvenile capital murder. Opting for a guilty plea, he admitted to the crime, leading to a 40-year prison sentence with parole eligibility in 2027, bypassing a full trial.
Later, Paris confessed to premeditating the assault on Ella. His sinister intentions extended beyond his sister's death. He aimed to inflict anguish on his mother by depriving her of both children. While initially targeting his mother, he ultimately chose to end Ella's life, recognizing it as the ultimate punishment for his mother.
In fact, in an interview conducted from prison, Paris is quoted as saying, "For many years, there was just this hot, flaming ball of wrath in the pit of my stomach, and it was directed at my mother. And one of the reasons why I chose to kill my sister and not someone else is because I knew that by doing that, I could hurt my mother in the worst possible way, because I'd always known as a child that the most devastating thing to my mother would be the loss of one of her children, and I found a way to take away both her children in one fell swoop." End quote.
And during a documentary titled "The Family I Had," Paris is quoted saying, "I chose to do my crime and I take full responsibility for my crime, and I wouldn't say there was a predisposition to what happened. I am not insane and I don't suffer from any mental illness." End quote.
Ever since that tragic night, butterflies hold a poignant significance for Charity, tied to her late daughter Ella's final school painting. In 2012, she welcomed a new child into the world, named him Phoenix. As far as Paris Bennett, he's currently incarcerated and will be eligible for parole at the age of 33 years old in February of 2027, just 3 short years away from this recording. If he is not granted parole, he will be released in February of 2047, and he will be 53. While this case is closed, this episode, however, is not over, so hold tight.
Charity has visited Paris multiple times in prison, encountering his persistent hatred. During their meetings, he would coldly admit to the murder, taunting her with statements like, quote, "You're right, I did kill her," end quote. Also expressing enjoyment in witnessing her pain. In one chilling incident, Charity detailed in her journal that she believes Paris would harm her if given the chance. Recounting a harrowing episode, she wrote, quote, "He slammed the table into me, pinning me against the concrete wall behind me, cutting off my air. I was shocked, paralyzed, thinking I was going to die. Then he pulled back the table. I caught my breath, only for him to slam it into me again." End quote.
Despite the advised precautions due to the potential danger upon Paris's release, Charity allows her youngest son, Phoenix, to maintain limited communication with his incarcerated brother. Her purpose is to instill the values of unconditional love and forgiveness in her youngest child, even in the face of the looming threat.
Reflecting on the unfathomable crime committed by Paris, Charity has gained insights into the factors that led her son down this dark path. She recognizes her past drug use as a contributing factor, given that during this time, Paris assumed the responsibility of caring for his younger sister, Ella.
And despite the overwhelming emotions, Charity has consciously chosen to forgive her son and embrace him for who he is, acknowledging Paris's psychopathy and his capacity for unspeakable acts. She candidly states, quote, "My son is a psychopath. I can't help him. That may not matter in the long run. What may matter is I can't, not at this point, give up on him. I love my firstborn with as much intensity as I have since that day I found out I was pregnant with him." End quote.
Charity knows Paris can be dangerous, believing he might harm someone again without remorse. She hopes that prison keeps him from causing more harm, expressing worry about the human rights situation in Texas prisons. Her introspection aided her in grieving the loss of whom she calls her, quote, guardian angel, also affectionately referred to as Ella Bella. Since the tragic incident, Charity connects Ella with butterflies, which, like we mentioned earlier, was the subject of her final school painting. On the day she returned home after the murder, a friend discovered a butterfly brooch in her backyard, adding to the symbolism.
After that awful day, Charity moved to San Antonio, got a crisis interventionist license, and founded the Ella Foundation, which is not only the name of her late daughter, but also an acronym for empathy, love, lessons, and action. The foundation focuses on those impacted by the criminal justice system, mental illness, and violence. It's also worth noting that Charity's also an author, co-writing a book called How Now Butterfly, a memoir of murder, survival, and transformation with Brian Whitney. The book details her journey overcoming the loss of her daughter and dealing with her psychopathic son's imprisonment. Charity, with over 2,000 hours of volunteer experience, is a certified crisis interventionist, anger management specialist, theft addiction specialist, seeking safety facilitator, and has created evidence-based programs for those affected by violence.
About 2 years ago, Charity posted the following message on Facebook. Phoenix, who is now 8, is still amazing, super smart, had his IQ tested, he's at 132. He's funny, moody, stubborn, and very attached to his mama. This spring, he was formally diagnosed with ADHD. We made the joint decision to try a low-dose medication regimen to see how it went. Phoenix and I both are very happy with the outcome.
She went on to say on this post, quote, "I finally took the plunge and pulled Phoenix out of public school and began homeschooling him. Again, Phoenix and I were both pretty damn happy with the outcome. Online schooling was not for him. Trying to fit a square peg into a round hole is not for either of us. Were he still in public school, he would have entered 3rd grade this August. Homeschool is year-round for us with a 2-week break every 3rd month, and he just started his 4th grade curriculum. About 2 months ago, I leased my city house out and moved out to the country to be closer to my mother, who is still dealing with stage 4 cancer. At some point, the cancer spread to her brain, but being the badass that she is, she's still living the fullest life she can. I just make sure she doesn't fall over doing it or overexert herself or get eaten by the alligators in the lake that she feeds every morning."
She continues with, quote, "I completely walked away from my eldest child and have not looked back. It is one thing to be a child who makes horrible decisions. It's another thing altogether to be a 27-year-old man and keep making decisions that put your family at risk. The final straw was learning that he was involved with a woman who lived 2 hours away from us and was out on bond for planning a mass shooting. Boundaries had been crossed too many times. I bought a gun, learned how to shoot it. I'm really good now," and said goodbye. I finally accepted it. It's okay to love him as my son, but really dislike the man he has become. I shut down the Ella Foundation permanently after 13 years of processing my trauma by helping others process their trauma. One movie, countless interviews, countless classes taught, one book, hundreds of speeches, in the setting of so many examples of love, empathy, and compassion for anyone who looked to me as an example. I reached the point where I finally felt I have kept my promise to Ella. to make something meaningful come from her death." End quote.
She then proceeds with, quote, "Now I stay focused mostly on the present. The past is always with me. The future is not mine yet to dwell on too long, and the present that I have is a blessing. I've learned how to be truly at peace with my existence, except for those days when homeschool is not going well, and I have to remind myself I've already chosen to be sterile in my next life, and everything temporary is bearable, and it's all temporary."
And finally, she ended the post with, quote, "So that's the short version. I assure you the long version is a lot more complex, amusing, and absurd, because that's how my life has always been. The long version will be in book 2, one day. As always, much love and so many hugs to all." End quote.
We're going to go ahead and read a letter that Charity wrote to Paris on his 20th birthday, which was October 10th of 2013. This came from a blog that she writes from, which we will include under sources in the episode show notes, but listen as Amanda reads.
"Dear Paris, 20 years ago, on the day you were born, I took one look at you and two things simultaneously occurred. A feeling of fierce love unlike any I ever had experienced before took root in my heart, and the realization and accompanying fear finally hit my brain that I had absolutely no idea how to be a good mother, which had been engaged until I took that very moment. And these blissful fantasies of mom and baby always in perfect harmony. I had no good example of how to be a good mother, but I figured I knew two things I hoped would work in my favor. I knew what not to do, how not to be, and I knew what kind of mom I wished I had. Armed with that knowledge, I set about making you two promises that day, October 10th, 1993. One of the things I knew not to do was make promises to your child you never intended or could not keep. So in spite of the fact that you blissfully slept through me whispering my promises in your ear, I considered my promises the foundation of the house of love I wanted to build for you to live in. The first promise I made to you was to love you always, no matter what, unconditionally. I know too well what conditional love feels like, what damage is done to your heart and soul when you are judged unworthy because of your mistakes instead of loved for your existence. We all make mistakes. We should all be loved in spite of those mistakes. Then we should be loved even more because we make mistakes. Being loved through our mistakes is what gives us confidence and will to learn from those mistakes to become a better person. I have kept my first promise to you. I can say with great certainty that I will continue to keep this promise to you for as long as I live. I continue to hope that loving you unconditionally will give you the confidence and will to be the best person you can be. The second promise I made to you was to be the best mother I could be to you and for you. This promise has always been and still is a bit harder to keep for many reasons. As a parent, it is hard to figure out what is the best thing to do for your child and/or for your child in normal circumstances. I think we can both agree that many of the circumstances that I have tried to keep this promise in and about as far as normal as one can be. At times, I know I have failed miserably in keeping this promise, but I hope the love I feel for you and have shown you has or will trump any damage my failures cause you to suffer. There have been times I believe I'm doing the best thing for you, and you most likely think I'm full of shit and wish I would just back off or stop doing whatever it is I'm doing that you disagree with. In these times, please reflect back on all the years I have kept my promise. One, and try to love me unconditionally as you can now that you're old enough to understand this concept and the emotions that accompany it better. We won't always see eye to eye. I will never stop being your mom, but I know I'm doing my best to make the transition to being a true friend to you now that you're growing up. It is confusing at times to determine if your child needs a parent or a friend. So here we are on the cusp of your 20th birthday. I can't even begin to describe to you how it is possible and how emotional and overwhelmingly surreal it is for me to look down on you and see both the baby I held close to whisper my promises in his ear and the full-grown, extremely easy on the eyes, brilliant man who could if he was allowed to, pick me up as easily as I used to pick him up. The best and simplest way to sum up is just to tell you that in spite of the passage of 20 years and all that has transpired between us, I still look at you and feel the same fiercer love that swept me away the moment I laid eyes on you. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice would not let a mother help her child celebrate and acknowledge the passage out of his teen years and into his young manhood. I can't bake for you, send you a gift, see you on your birthday, because it does not fall on a normal visitation day. I can't sing to you happy birthday unless you decide to call me on October 10th. So I'm left giving you what I hope you consider as a gift, and it's something that no one, not you, not TDCJ, no one can ever take away from you. For your 20th birthday, I make you 2 more sacred promises, Paris Lee. My firstborn, my first love. I promise I will always be by your side as long as you are locked away from mine. No matter where Texas sends you, no matter how much time passes, no matter what you have done to survive, no matter what I have to do to get to there to see you. I will never turn my back on you while you are incarcerated. You will never be one of the forgotten ones. You will always know that someone in the free loves you, thinks of you, and misses you. People often ask me how I can continue to stand by you after all that you did and all the suffering it causes me. I always respond the same. I tell them that when you were a toddler, I had to take you to daycare so that I could get to class and work. I hated to leave you. It was so hard to walk away, and a part of my mind and heart always was with you in that daycare. Every afternoon I would walk into the classroom, pick you up, and you were fine, playing and content. So I would sit on the floor and wait for you to notice me. As soon as you saw me, your eyes would light up with a look of pure happiness. You would drop what you were doing, run across the room, and jump on me. That was the best part of my day, every day. Almost every time I have come to visit you since you have been incarcerated, I still see that look in your eyes when you first see me. It may be just for a split second, so quick, I have to really be paying attention to see it, or it may linger the entire visit. Sometimes it has been replaced with a look of anger, hatred, or contempt, but it has never been entirely demolished. This is how I know that my Paris is still in there. I promise I will never give up on my Paris. Never give up on my hope and belief that the Paris who got locked up in the underground room inside of you that night that you killed Ella will find a way to survive both prison and that underground room. I know you're still in there. You may forget sometimes. Your environment may force you to hide him away. But when you are with me, you can let that boy out without any fear. I will love him the same way I have loved every other boy that lives inside of you, unconditionally, no matter what. Happy 20th birthday, Paris Lee. Since I can't give you a cake, I guess you'll have to settle for unconditional love, a mom who tries her best to be a good mom and a good friend, loyalty and unwavering faith in the man I know you can be. End quote. And she ends the letter with, all in all, not a bad gift to get, I think.
You know, it's really hard to know what she's going through as the mother of a murder victim perpetrated by her own son. It has to be very confusing and also very difficult to convey emotionally. And now she has her youngest son, born after all of this, to protect as well as herself. You would forever be at a crossroads as to whether or not you could truly forgive, because the reminder is forever burned in your heart. Not only that, but her own son wanted to inflict the worst kind of harm on his own mom by taking away something so precious. Personally, I don't think I could function as a human if this had happened to me. I mean, I admit that I don't know what I would do. I'd feel extreme sadness, anger, and loss for the rest of my life. As a reminder, Paris Lee Bennett is currently incarcerated at the Ferguson Unit, Texas State Prison. He will be eligible for parole at the age of 33 years old in February of 2027. As you all are probably aware, Ella's light continues to shine, and we hope that Charity and Phoenix remain safe and never have to worry about Paris ever hurting them. We avoid giving our opinions and whatnot on these cases, as well as family members of those who have murdered. However, My opinion is that this is an absolutely horrific way to punish your mother. And I think that Paris is a piece of fucking shit for all of this. I wish he'd stay incarcerated for life. The streets are just much safer without him free.
We would really like to hear what you all thought of this case. We'd like to maybe start a conversation on the role that our mental health could play. How we can be more vigilant in the moment when our kids show any red flags. And really, if you have any opinions on anything, we'd like to hear it all. All of our links are listed in the show notes, so feel free to reach out.
4-year-old Ella Bennett was a bee, and don't you forget it. In many ways, so is Charity. Whether she made mistakes or not, she is a surviving victim in this because she lost something so precious to something completely senseless and cruel. Let's remember, no matter what everybody thinks, she's a mother first, and she lost something so incredibly precious and innocent. Like all victims and survivors, Charity and Ella are both bees. Bees are strong, resilient, yet vulnerable. We must protect the bees at all costs, for without bees, we as a human race cannot survive or thrive in life. So, be vigilant, for when you mess with the bees,
you get the hive.
Thank you for listening to A Nefarious Nightmare. Music used in the theme was originally by Ghost Stories Incorporated, remixed by Ryan RCX Murphy. Additional background music is provided by Epidemic Sound. A Nefarious Nightmare is scripted, researched, and produced by Courtney Fenner and Amanda Cronin. I'm Lainey Hobbs, and as always, be vigilant, for when you mess with the bees, you get the hive.